Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and in today's video, we're going to take a look at my team selection ahead of Game Week 29. Welcome back everyone to another video. Now today's video is aiming, at least, to be a little bit shorter than usual because we've got limited time, it's a Tuesday deadline, and I did run through quite a few of my transfer plans yesterday after the Sunday evening games had wrapped up. So I don't want to go over old ground too much, but we have had some new information that will help me plan my team ahead of Game Week 29. And hopefully that information will prove useful to you and your decisions ahead of Game Week 29 as well. If you did enjoy today's video, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like, hit subscribe, especially if you're new around here and you did enjoy today's content. Let's start off by taking a look at my goalkeeper and my, well, back four at the moment, but certainly my defense generally, starting off with Kelleher. Now, the update since I last recorded a video, since last night in fact, is that Kelleher is back and in the squad available for Bournemouth away. Obviously, he was away very briefly to celebrate the birth of his child, so you'd expect him to come back in, but we have had confirmation that he'll be back in training and in the squad for the Bournemouth game. And I do think that he is a better player to be starting than Dubravka away at Everton. Burnley, of course, are a really poor defence, so if I've got Kelleher ready to play, even against Bournemouth, which is not an easy fixture, I will absolutely play him instead. Now, moving into my back four, I don't think we need to run through Gabriel, Timber or Virgil van Dijk all too much. Gabriel will stay until possibly the very last minute in Game Week 31 when they do blank, but more likely than not, I'm probably just going to hold on to him because I've got value tied up in him and I have a feeling that I'm going to want him on a wild card in Game Week 32 as well. So he'll probably stay. Timber will leave my team at some point, I think, just to make sure that I do have a full playing 11 for Game Week 31. But for the time being, now that he's scored a goal as well and proven that he is capable of getting attacking returns, I think I'm pretty happy to hold on to him. Brighton away, followed by Everton at home. Two decent fixtures. Arsenal are always top of the charts for clean sheet odds. So they haven't kept one recently, but I think they're due one. So if I've got that double up of Timber and Gabriel, both with attacking threat, I think they both start. Timber may be slightly more of a question mark, considering he just played 90 in Game Week 28, but I don't think Ben White's back in the fold just yet, so I think he's going to be okay. Virgil van Dijk, a very safe option for the next 3 game weeks. If there's one player that you know is going to play 90 week in, week out, it should be him. I've just said that, and now he'll go and get randomly injured in training, but we are relatively confident of him normally. And with 3 good fixtures, decent odds of a clean sheet in at least 2 of those fixtures up to Game Week 31, I still think he is a good purchase if you don't already have him. The final one is Anderson, still flagged ahead of West Ham at home. We haven't had the press conference from Marco Silva yet. We expect to have that before the deadline though, so we're waiting for information on not only Anderson, but also Harry Wilson as well. We'll talk about that in just a moment's time. But given that it was just an illness, I'm relatively happy with the odds of him starting against West Ham at home. Obviously, he's in their best 11, so will come back in as soon as he's available to do so. And it's a good home fixture. He gets good defcon, decent clean sheet odds. I will be starting him ahead of Elliot Anderson or Alderete if he's fit to do so. But if he's not, I don't think it's worth a transfer. As discussed yesterday, I think Elliot Anderson and Alderete are both decent enough as options off my bench this week. If the Fulham Anderson doesn't play, I think they're fine. So I'd expect 3 or 4 points from Elliot Anderson. Therefore, I don't think it's worth a transfer to get rid of a player that once he's recovered from illness, even if he misses this week, he's still got another 2 good fixtures, and it's another transfer that would then be used on a player that doesn't blank in Game Week 31. I need to be very careful with those transfers. So for me, he's a hold, and I do think he's relatively likely to start in Game Week 29 rather. Okay, so moving into the midfield, I think 3 players are almost certainly going to stay this week. That is Bruno Fernandes and Burmo and Rodgers. Now, Fernandes is just a fantastic option. I think if Haaland's out and you don't own Ekitike, you don't own Semenyo, for instance, then Fernandes is probably the next best option for captaincy against a Newcastle side that have been leaking goals recently. And it doesn't look likely to turn the corner anytime soon with Bruno G still out of the fold. He adds a lot of control to their game. And I do wonder if the Man United game will be a bit of a struggle for them as well. Now, of course, they're a good side with plenty of quality players and they could turn a corner at any moment. But But I think the odds are that Man United have a decent chance of scoring a couple of goals in that one. Fernandes is obviously a good pick. We don't need to discuss him. And Mbeumo is a player I brought for the next 4 weeks back in game week 28. Didn't do anything in game week 28 itself, but the next 3 fixtures are still all right. And the upside of the player is there. So I don't want to react too quickly to one poor game week from him when he's been great throughout the entire season. So fingers crossed that this matchup works out pretty well for him against Newcastle, but it's probably the weakest of the remaining 3 fixtures before I wildcard. So I'm not expecting big things, but I'm willing to be surprised, and it's certainly not a transfer out for me. Rodgers is a very frustrating player to own at the moment. I think he's returned or got 3 attacking returns in his last 11 game weeks now. But when he does tend to pick up bonus points as well. And as I mentioned yesterday, it does feel like the Chelsea game is one of those matches where he will put on a bit of a show, or at least try to. I've got a gut feeling on this one. I think that he has a decent chance of doing well in this one. And although he's been poor recently, as have Aston Villa to a certain extent, I wouldn't put it past him to show up in the big match against Chelsea. So let's wait and see. I think if I had no other problems with my 11 and I had plenty of free transfers, maybe no blanks coming up, then I would be looking at him as a potential player to be moving on. But I've got far bigger issues. Now, one of those bigger issues is Declan Rice. We haven't had much information on him as of yet, but we have had little rumors in the community. So I'll talk about that later on in the video when we reference my transfer plans. But there is a chance that he does play in game week 29. So I think it's worth noting that. And if he does, Brighton away followed by Everton at home, not bad at all. You'd imagine that no matter what, he gets rested against Mansfield in the FA Cup. So he should be fine for Everton. And then maybe he's a last-minute sale before game week 31. He's been a pretty decent FPL pick all season, so I don't want to rush things and get rid of him just on the off chance he does miss a match, but we do need to deal with the injury doubts and have a plan in place in case he is potentially out for Brighton. And also, there are other midfielders with plenty of attacking upside with good fixtures over the next 3 game weeks as well. And given we're looking at potentially selling Declan Rice fairly soon ahead of the blank anyway, maybe this is an opportunity to get rid of him a little bit sooner. Okay, so before moving into my forward line, I wanted to reference my potential transfer routes with Declan Rice. Whether or not he is injured is a different thing, but I doubt we'll get anything solid from Arteta ahead of the deadline. So I think we're going to have a plan in place for how confident you are that he is going to start, and then whether or not you're willing to move him on this game week, if indeed you do have him. I do, and I'm looking at 3 potential replacements. Number 1, by quite a distance actually, would be Harry Wilson. Now, if Harry Wilson is fit, I think he's the obvious replacement for me. A lot of people already own him, so that won't be relevant to you. But with West Ham, Nottingham Forest and Burnley as the next 3, I think he is a very good player to be buying now at a decent price, just 6 million, saves me a bit of money. He's got slightly better data than Declan Rice, and he's been running hot all season as well. The big question on Harry Wilson is whether or not he will be available for game week 29, having gone off with an ankle injury. It looked like he twisted his ankle in the first half at some point, played on for another 27 minutes of the second half before going down and coming off the pitch. Marco Silva, obviously after the match, referenced that he had been dealing with a bit of a knock in the first half, said that he might need to come off, and they kept playing him for a little while longer. The only recent update we've had is an Instagram post from Harry Wilson himself, or should I say his social media team, if it's being run by one, saying, "We go again Wednesday." Now, does that mean he's definitely going to be ready to start in game week 29? No, it's far from a guarantee. And it could just be one of those situations where the media team or the social media team managing his account has put out generic wording around the fact that he's celebrating a goal. Obviously, it's a team spirit. We go again Wednesday could be in the generic Fulham sense. But as a social media manager myself, I've managed players' accounts, I've managed team accounts before. I do find the wording a little bit odd if you know he's got an injury. And maybe they're just keeping their cards very close to their chest. But if he was a significant doubt for Wednesday, I don't think I would personally be posting that exact wording. Now, does that mean he's guaranteed to play? Absolutely not. And we should get a press conference from Marco Silva before the deadline. So it's almost pointless speculating on this. But for me, this post at least indicates a slightly positive update. But again, it's far from any sort of confirmation that he will be starting. I just find it a little bit odd for a social media manager, if they are managing his account, to be saying those exact words if it's not likely that he's going to be involved in the squad. Usually if a player is injured and he's out, they use slightly different wording. But again, that's just me. There are other social media managers who run other player accounts that will probably deal with things very differently. So let's just wait and see what Marco Silva says. He's usually fairly forthright with his press conference notes, so we might get an update. And if he's fit, I think even if Declan Rice is likely to play, I might still make that transfer. I think Wilson, the upside is there. He's cheaper. I love the fixtures, and it gets rid of a player who blanks in game week 31. So I think I would prioritise Wilson if he was fit, regardless of Rice's fitness. Now, moving on to the other two players, Sharda and Tavernier, I think those two picks I'm probably only likely to consider if Declan Rice is a significant doubt going into the Game Week 29 deadline. Now, I'll flash up on screen the latest update from a fairly reliable source on X. I personally hadn't heard of them too much before, but I've talked to a few Arsenal supporting friends, and they say that usually they are on the money. So it looks likely that it's not a sprain and that it's mainly precautionary. He's possibly in line for a rest on Wednesday, given that he has played a lot of minutes. But given that they've then got Mansfield after Brighton, I think if he's close to fitness, and it looks likely he is, he's so important to the team that it's got to be quite likely he starts. So I don't know whether we're going to get perfect information on this, but I think if I'm reading between the lines, he should be fairly likely to play against Brighton. But again, that's far from a guarantee. We're working on limited information. And like I said, if we get a positive update on Wilson, I will probably just buy Wilson regardless. But if we get nothing on Declan Rice and we don't get a positive update on Wilson, then picking one of Sharda or Tavernier is going to be the question for me. So moving on to Sharda and Tavernier as the potential Rice replacements if he is out of Game Week 29. And for what it's worth, if he's out for 29 for sure, I probably will sell him because then it's only Everton before the blank. And the players as alternatives that I'm looking at have 3 good fixtures. So I think it is worth making those transfers if he is indeed out. So then it's a question whether I look at a Brentford midfielder or a Bournemouth midfielder, and if so, who? Now, I don't think that it's a clear-cut choice between either, and I don't think there's one correct answer. But yesterday, I didn't mention Kevin Sharda, and then I went and recorded my regular weekly podcast on Who Got the Assist with Tom, who was actually really keen on Sharda, and it reminded me how good he can be and what the data is. So shout out to Tom, shout out to Who Got the Assist there. Obviously a much longer format if you are into that kind of thing. Sharda's data is very good at 0.52. And although he didn't get great minutes in Game Week 28, around 71, I believe, that might be just to keep him fresh for Game Week 29 against Bournemouth away from home. So I think the odds of him starting are good. He's got the best underlying attacking data by far out of all of these picks. And he is very, very differential. Now, Dango Otaro was bought by quite a few managers ahead of Game Week 28. Sharda, not so much. And he does have slightly better goal threat. And I do just wonder if going for the differential here with slightly better threat, as far as I'm concerned, I don't need the money elsewhere either before wildcarding. So I might as well go for the more expensive pick. I think Sharda might be an interesting play. So shout out again to Tom for suggesting him. I like the fixtures for the next 3 game weeks. Bournemouth and Leeds both away, but Wolves at home. I think it's good as a triple. So I quite like him. Tavernier is the player I mentioned yesterday as well. 2 home fixtures in the next 3. Burnley as the away fixture. All of that is very good news. He's got decent underlying attacking data, and over Sharda, he's got penalties. So I think all of that as a combination is really tempting. And of course, he is 5.3 million. So if I did want to save the money and use it elsewhere before wildcarding, he could be really tempting. I think out of the 2, it is very, very close. I'm tempted to maybe look at Sharda, even though he's more expensive, because I'm not using that money elsewhere. I'll take the extra 0.13 in terms of the underlying attacking data per 90. I think it's pretty tempting. But all of that to say, if Rice is fit, I won't sell him for either of them. And if Wilson's fit, then no matter what, I'll just go and buy Wilson. So it's in a priority list. Wilson comes out on top. Then ideally I would hold on to Rice beneath that. Then it's Sharda and Tavernier under that. Okay, so wrapping up with my forward line, and I've also added in my captaincy and vice captaincy ahead of the deadline. No questions about it. If Haaland is fit, he will be my captain ahead of game week 29. It's a good home fixture. Obviously, he missed out on game week 28, and there are still rumours circulating as to whether or not he'll play in game week 29. But if we get good news, he would be my captain. And actually, even if we get bad news on him and he is out, then I think my replacement would be the captain this week. So that armband is firmly locked into that first centre forward role this week, whether that's on Haaland or the alternative. And then I've got Thiago as the second striker. I think he's one of the top 3 strikers to own right now. Got good underlying data, 3 good fixtures, as we mentioned just now with Sharda. So I don't think he's going anywhere. But importantly, we need to talk about Haaland and what the plan is and what the latest injury rumours are around him ahead of game week 29. Okay, so I think it is important to have a plan in place, just depending on what news we get with Erling Haaland ahead of game week 29. It's pretty simple for me and probably for a lot of managers. If he is out for game week 29, I think he is probably a sell. Now, in certain situations, he might not be. Maybe you've already wildcarded, you've got a lot of value tied up in him. So if he misses a week or two, then it might still be worth holding on to him. But for me, because I'm wildcarding in game week 32 most likely, and because City are very likely to blank in game week 31, if we know he's out of game week 29 as well, then for me at least, there's very little logic to holding on to him for the game week 30 fixture alone, especially considering that the West Ham game in game week 30 is sandwiched by the 2 Real Madrid ties in the Champions League. So he might still get his minutes managed in the West Ham game as well. So if he's out, I will be replacing him with Ekitike. If you didn't have Thiago, but you did have Ekitike, then there's your answer. You buy Thiago instead. And I really like Ekitike for this week. Away at Wolves, I think he's a very good captaincy candidate, especially if Erling Haaland is out. And if I made this move because Haaland was out or confirmed to be out ahead of game week 29, then Ekitike would probably wear the armband this week for me. Good data, good fixtures over the next 3 game weeks. I think it is as simple as that for me, in my mind at least. The big question then is whether or not Erling Haaland is going to be fit for game week 29. The news that we got over the weekend, after we found out that he was going to miss game week 28, is that it looks likely he'll be back the following week. Now, whether or not that means game week 29 itself, or possibly by the end of the week for the FA Cup tie against Newcastle, we don't know yet. But we have seen him back arriving at training today. I was about to say in training, but we haven't had any images of him in kit yet. But we've seen him entering the complex. I'll flash that up on screen now via Erling Haaland himself, or again, at least his social media team. Does that mean he's any more likely to play? Probably not, but it's worth noting that he's at least back at the complex. But you could say that about Florian Wirtz last week. We had pictures of him turning up in training kit-ish, and pictures went up on Liverpool's social media accounts, and then he wasn't fit to play. So I don't think we can take that as a given that Haaland is going to be okay. But again, at least he's back in the ground. At least he's back in the complex. So that might be positive. And again, the early rumblings are that it's not a long-term thing and that there are expectations that he should be back pretty quickly. Whether or not we get any news on him, I don't know. But we should have a press conference before the deadline. Maybe Pep will be honest with us for once. And fingers crossed he is, because I'd like good information as to whether or not he is going to be fit. Because if he is a major doubt, then Ekitike seems like an obvious transfer in. But if Haaland's fit, I do want to hold on to him all the way through to wildcarding, because I do have value tied up in him. And I think he is probably the best captaincy candidate for the next 2 weeks if he is fit. So I'm going to cross my fingers, hope we get some sort of update. But if we don't get anything, the temptation to move across to Ekitike will be there. Because if we think he's 50% likely to play against Nottingham Forest, and then again, West Ham, he might get reduced minutes, whereas Ekitike, likely to play the next 3, likely to get good data in all 3 of those very decent matches, it's pretty tempting to make the move for a player that does, unfortunately, likely blank in game week 31 in Erling Haaland. So the temptation is there. I think for me, in terms of prioritizing, I'm just going to go back to my full team. If we get bad news about Erling Haaland, then I'll scrap my Rice plans and I'll just deal with Erling Haaland this week and probably lean on my bench to replace Declan Rice. Not ideal, but I'm not willing to take a hit, I don't think, to replace him. If we get slightly better news on Erling Haaland, then my attention will shift to moving Declan Rice on, ideally to Harry Wilson. But if Harry Wilson isn't fit, then it will probably be one of Sharda or Tavernier. I think I'm slightly edging towards Sharda all of a sudden, and I don't really have too much logic behind that other than the attacking data looks slightly better, and he is very, very differential. That being said, so is Tavernier, and he does have penalties, so I'll have a bit more of a think about that, but ideally, I don't have to sell either Haaland or Rice unless we get good news on Harry Wilson. If that happens, then I would probably just buy Harry Wilson, but I think that's fairly unlikely. So anyway, that's my team as it currently stands. Like I said, my transfers could go in one of two directions this week, so it is dependent on the press conferences tomorrow, but I wanted to get this video out to you as quickly as possible because you won't have any time to watch it after all the press conferences before the deadline tomorrow. So get your teams locked in, have plans in place ahead of the deadline for the different players that are flagged, and then react to the press conferences as quickly as you can. Anyway, hopefully that's been helpful. Leave a like, hit subscribe if you're new around here as well, and leave a comment below if you've got any further questions ahead of the deadline.